Everyone, welcome to day 27. Again, we are here. We are looking into backend system now. We have seen the front end system of static design. We will move toward the activity after making the APIs and integrating with them. We have seen the designing part. We are in the first iteration now. So, first, let's look at the task we have to do. And now, the task we have to do is the backend development. We have designed the database and now we have to start with the API development. So in the now you are thinking what is the API? So how does it work? What are the different things it relate with the database? So get back to that part, and we have also looked making the use of the Flask, introduction to Flask and how to use that. So let's first understand the APIs and then we will start working on it. So let's start. So let me show you something. So think in this way. And now, so now we have two systems. So to make you understand, so understand this in a black box thing. Let's say you have two things, two server. One is backend running at one server and front end running on another server. So what does API does? API is a way of communication between two servers. So backend communicate with the front end and front end communicate with the backend. So what does they communicate? So front end generally asks for the data or sends the data the user given to him. And what does backend do? Backend do the operation from the front end that what the data it requires. So it performs some operations and then send the data back to the front end. And also if the data is coming from the front end, it stores the data in the database. So it has two work. One is sending data. It sends data to system to or instead sends data and it receives the request. Now, what does backend do? Backend do the operations. Operation, that is CRUD. So CRUD is an operation which performed by the backend. So what does this stand for? So C stands for create, R stands for read, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. So every operation has its own meaning. See, for create, what does create means? So create means adding the data to the database. What read? So reading the data from the database. Whatever desired business logic we have. So to understand the business logic, you can say that you want to read only two of the data points, or you want to some filter data. Let's say you have 1,000 customers or 1,000 users in our case, and out of the 1,000 users, you want to see who has that posts or who has that comments. So you are fetching out from specific type of data. So that is a part of reading. Update. So there can be option of, let's say you have added some comment or added some caption in the image. Now you want to change the caption, because there can be possibility of getting the errors, either grammatical error or word error, or it could be possible that you don't want like that content. Now you want to change that content, you get better content. So that sort of thing can be there. So that's how you update the data and update the data. Now there's a delete thing. So let's say you have posted something, but that is, you don't want to post it now. You posted by mistake, or someone else posted it and you want to delete that. So that requires some delete operation. So that is known as a delete operation, and that is our operation performed by the backend system. And these are the operations related to that. Is the API we are using, RESTful APIs. So what is REST? So it is another form of REST APIs which operate these operations. So let me show you something. You can see it's a representational state transfer API. So any state you have in the backend, you can send it to front end, or any state you have in the front end, you can send that to the backend. So that state representation you can send either for and to. So now, to make it more clear, we are designing front end on some form of JavaScript, and we are designing backend on some form of Python. So both doesn't understand each other. Think in this way: like you are sitting in a Germany and some German people is talking to you, and you know you are sitting in India and you can talk in English and Hindi only. How will you communicate? So you require a translator who will make understand about what he says to you, and similarly what you say will be translated to him. So that work is done by API, and how we do that? We use a common structure that is known as JSON. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Again, it's some form which is which has some structure which used to represent the data. We will understand when we are building the APIs. So I guess you have understood the basic idea of what is API, why we are using that, and what to do. And this CRUD operation is done to some form of database. So it is operation on that part, and it sends the data again to backend, and backend sends data to front end with the logic. So I guess you are able to understand about the API. So let's move to the code part. Now we have to build the API, so we have to think, are we going to use some specific library for that? Are there any libraries included in the Python to do that? Or how we can build that? So two other questions we have. So one of the basic question is that yes, there is a library available and we can use that, and that library is the Flask RESTful. So let's look into that. What does library do? Just a second. Flask RESTful documentation. So we will look into that documentation. So you can see Flask RESTful is an extension of Flask because we are using the Flask, and based on that we can perform the operation, and you can see how to start it. So it says we have to import some resource, that is upper class, and again it is become the hierarchical object oriented programming, and we will add those things. So to start that, let's make it a simple something. First, we understand that we have to configure it, our APIs to that. And how does API is coming from? API is coming from Flask RESTful. Import API, right? And instead of making everything here, what we do, we will make our APIs in the application folder in another like in the module we made, and we make a folder so that we can structure it more. Or let's rename the folder API itself, not APIs. And in that, first make an API of the user. So now here, what we want? We want from Flask RESTful import resource. Marcel with. So these are the things we require. So first, and also we require from applications dot models import star. So star means importing everything. So we have defined something. Let's say now I want to make some of the resource class, and first resource class we have defined user. So let's make a resource class for login. So or sign up, because the first thing it will do is a sign up. So what does sign up will do? Sign up will have some post command. So why post? So to let you know why post, because in the sign up the data is coming. So now let me tell you what this post means and what this get means. So again, get back to the data, and in the REST APIs we will be using basic 4, that is get, post, put, and delete. So everything is linked similarly. Like create is linked with the post, read it linked with the get, update linked with the put, and delete linked with the delete itself of the CRUD operation. So in the sign up, we are sending the data. So we will, what we will do, we are creating something. So we will apply post. So that's why we added a post. But to write a clean code, what we does, we will say, we will define this in a format, what this class does. This resource contains APIs for creating user in our application, in our database for our application. So input data, what are input data we have for this? We have email, we have phone, we have username, and we have password. Right? So now I also want one more thing. So one of the thing I want, if you remember what I want from date time, import date time. Why it is required? If you remember the models.py of our file, so we require created that is a date time object, so we require date time of that, and also user ID. So how user ID is created? So we will use from uuid import uuid4. So this will be used to create the user ID. So these two things are required. So now let's say I want to see this. I want to have some resource. So for that, there's some parsing method that is required, and for that we use request parse. So request parse, what is it? Request, it contains the parsing objects. So let me show in the documentation itself. So now you can see request parse, what it does, it contains this type of thing. This is the different inputs, and for that it takes natural parameter. So now you will define some parser, and that takes an arguments. So let's define that in a similar fashion. For example, now parser dot add argument same email. Phone, username, and password. So we have added this. Now to add more, we will use this thing. So what is this? This is the argument which it will take, and in the argument we will define
Level and a magnum of Chapeldown English sparkling.
define this. So this is the post API to create an user for our application. What does argument contains? So argument dot get, it will get email equals to args dot get email. Similarly, we will define this 4 times and for 4 different things. Username for username, password for password, and finally phone for phone. So this is the basic thing you will get. But what happens if someone doesn't send this data? You need to validate that. So for validations, you can apply this if not email. So you can add return message at email required and 404, or any of the different codes. 404 is generally for file not found. So you can define this 404 email not found, or let's say 403. Instead of that, let's use the 301 input errors. Similarly, we will check for if username return username required, same 301. So let's copy this and paste it for every other thing. Now this is for password. This is for phone. Password required, phone number required. So you have done the basic check as well. Now, how to create something in the database? So we have to, again, what to do? We have to define a database command. So before that database command, you have to create some user ID, right? So for to create a user ID, let's define this user ID itself as is equals to UUID4. When you call this function, it will generate some random user ID which is universal code. Universal unique identifier it's known as for this. And for timestamp, or let's say created at, is equals to timestamp dot now. Or datetime dot now. Datetime dot now. So let's delete this lines. Now I want to add user to the database because now everything is checked. So we will say user equals to user, and where everything is now we will define user ID is equals to user ID, comma created at equals to created at, comma email equals to email, comma password equals to password, comma phone is equals to phone, comma username equals to username. So we have temporarily defined how we have to add user, and it doesn't still not get added. To add that, there is a command called db.session.commit. So if you think in this way that there can be multiple users can be created at one time, and let's say some user gets some error, so every user can be separated out. We create a session by in the database to have a control. That is where we will use db.session.commit, and similarly we will use db.session.add user, and it get added, and after addition you can return user created with the message 200. But there is one more check that need to be done. What if one of the email is already existing? So let's say you will call temp user from the user database. So for that you will use user.query.filter by. So it is known as the query command in the ORM. So first thing is user, that is the table name. Dot query means you are adding a query function, and which query you are running. So that is a filter. So we want email equals to email. We know emails must be unique, so this must be same. If existing, if temp user, return email already exists with some, let's say some code of 302. Now but we want, again we can have another check, similar check for username. So if this doesn't happen, then only we can create the user. So it is one of the user command which is generated. And now what we do, it has get initiated and we will see the documentation. The first thing, it is again adding the resource APIs. So I want something to be imported from applications dot API import star. Instead of that, dot user for now. Now we have imported something. Now what we want? We want to add. So API dot add resource. So where we add resource, what we does? We will define for which class. So that class is sign up. Let me show you. You can see it is a class name, and this is the URL for which it will work. So URL should be API slash sign up. But if you let me show you something, but still it will show some error. So first command will be source vnv slash bin slash activate. So you will see one of the errors because it's scanning this and it doesn't have one thing. First thing is let me add that itself. Flask RESTful. That's our requirements .txt. So it will install Flask RESTful. Let's wait for a few minutes. It is installing. Now let's run the application. So now you can see it is saying no module name application.api.user. So if I say this, it will bring this. So let's try this. So you can understand simply if any folder you are going to make, add it in the underscore underscore init. Just this thing will help you. So let me delete this if that is not working. So it's saying cannot import user. Okay. So actually I haven't added the extension, so it doesn't know. Let's see if it's there. Okay, it's not there. So we lost our app.py page, so no issues, we will create it again. So it was from Flask, import Flask, app equals to Flask underscore underscore name. App dot config dot add object. Config. So now let me we have to for that we have to import config from applications, import config from Flask RESTful, import API. So we will also add that here. API equals to API of app with app dot app context db dot create all. For that we have to import from applications, import models. Sorry, from application dot models, import star or db. Now from applications dot API, import user, and here we will add API dot add resource user dot sign up, comma slash API slash sign up. Now if underscore underscore name underscore underscore double equals to main app dot run debug equals to true, comma host is equals to 0.0.0.0. comma port equals to 5000. So it's a spelling error, so sorry about that. So again, let me add some WSL. It may not be working. CD backend, URC source venv slash bin slash activate python 3 app.py. So let's see app.config in Python. Or let's see the array here itself. So it's from object. So yeah. So also I have to do one thing. db.init app. So for now, if Marcel which is not working, so let's remove that import that is required some of the context. So now it's running. You can see we have built one of the APIs and we can use it anywhere in the application. And for now, we have used this. So from tomorrow, we will create this, test this, and also dive more into detail of this. Until then, thank you. Goodbye.